Well, why don't we get started? My name is Nathaniel Heller, and I'm really happy to do some lightweight facilitation of what I think will be a really rich conversation amongst two incredibly fascinating colleagues. And the three of us are going to try and speak to what I think is both a really important topic for a lot of non-governmental organizations or NGOs, but also in some ways a really simple one, which is trying to mobilize resources and raise money from high net worth individuals and families, which seems like a really straightforward topic. I suspect as we get into this conversation, we'll sort of complicate it in a happy way a little bit. But I hope towards the end, one of the takeaways is that this isn't rocket science. There are some tips and tricks, but one doesn't need a PhD to sort of do this work. This is part of Global Impact's Philanthropy Insight video series. I work at an organization in Geneva Global, which is a sister organization to Global Impact. We do a lot of philanthropy advising for the kinds of people and families we'll talk about today. So I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm really looking forward to learning from both Christin and Kathryn. And with that, maybe I'll ask you both just to really briefly introduce yourselves and where you're coming from. I think you both bring really interesting and unique perspective to the conversation. So to put someone on the spot arbitrarily, Kathryn, do you want to say hello? And we know kind of from your background where you're coming from, but tell us what the day job is.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Nathaniel, for having us, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm Kathryn Compton, and I'm Chief Development Officer for Strong Women, Strong World at World Vision. And so we are an expression of our work both in the field for women and girls, focusing on the issues of women and girls, but also on women in philanthropy and what the roles are for women in philanthropy as they're growing more and more, and what their part is to being very solution-based for the issues and challenges of women and girls.
Super, thank you. And speaking of women in philanthropy, that might be an unanticipated but perfect segue to you, Christin. You have a unique perspective on all this. Please go ahead and say hello.
Yeah, so I'm Christin McClave, and I have been on the World Vision Board with working with Kathryn in various ways with the Strong Women, Strong World Advisory Council. I am currently serving on the Global Impact Board with Kathryn as well. And my day job is I'm Chief Growth Officer at AchieveNEXT, which is a talent performance and HR consulting company. And then as well, I have over many, many years through our family philanthropy have, been involved in various forms of philanthropy. We had our own foundation for many years, and then decided to take a different path and go the DAF route, and am still, of course, participating in a variety of ways in philanthropy, and have various causes and that I'm passionate about, but I'm also very connected and passionate about bringing other high net worth people and friends and into the fold to enjoy the benefits of generosity and philanthropy as well.
Super. Well, I'm really excited for the next little while with both of you. And maybe an interesting, if seemingly kind of mundane place to start this conversation is, who are we talking about in real life and in real life terms? I think for a lot of organizations, the jargon of ultra high net worth or high net worth individual or family sort of feels overwhelming and sometimes sort of ratchets up the stakes and the anxiety. I mean, when you both think about the kinds of individuals and families we're talking about, is it a numeric threshold? Is it a kind of giving sort of criteria that sort of lands a family or an individual in this bucket? And sort of, and in particular for nonprofit organizations, what kinds of families and individuals are worth the process and worth sort of cultivating versus ones that may not fit, whether it's because of ability to give, cultural fit, et cetera, et cetera. And feel free to jump in, either of you.
I think I'll take that first. Is that all right, Christin? Okay,
Yes.
Great. I think that different organizations will rank by the giving threshold, but also, which is important. And we do that at World Vision, where we have what we look at as our, in a donor pyramid, our middle donors, our high net worth, and then our ultra high net worth. And those are between, the middle donors are between 5 and 25,000. Our high net worth go from 25,000 up to 500,000 per year, and then ultra high net worth anywhere above that, and preferably $1 million per year for a 5-year period, and what the giving threshold is. But I think more importantly than just looking at the numerical giving, it would be the donative intent, and what the desire is for those donors to be able to engage in the work that you're trying to do, and go beyond just their individual check writing ability, as Christin said earlier, and she's been critical and very catalytic within the Strong Women, Strong World Council of bringing others into the fold and introducing others into that. So is there a willingness to raise awareness of the issues, use their influence to bring others in? And that could either advocate and grow the giving, and at the end of the day, absolutely write the check. And so I think that there's multiple things that we need to be looking at when we're trying to qualify our donors and our prospects.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was going to ask you, Christin, just as a follow-on, you've done a lot of this connecting, whether I suspect you've done it as part of a master plan or not, but I've certainly seen it in action, and so has Kathryn. Is there a kind of inverse set of answers to that, in terms of when you think of friends and family and contacts who may be in a position to give, what some of those criteria are in terms of fit with organizations? And there are, tens of thousands of legitimately amazing organizations around the world doing amazing work, and it's awfully hard to choose. And I've seen a lot of families get overwhelmed by this sort of, just endless list of issues, topics, sectors. So what jumps to mind, from the other side of that conversation as a fit criteria?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of factors. I mean, obviously, you start with, what are they passionate about? And that's kind of probably 101 for all of you who are professionals in the space. And particularly though, I think the nuances to remember as someone, on that side of the table, just to know that each person in a family unit could have different passions, and the way that they interpret, a certain cause could be very different than the person sitting next to them at the family dinner table. So, and we've, as a family, my family's experienced that over time. Just, my parents are passionate about something, and we, as kids, in turn, were passionate about something as well, but taking some differences on the way that we would approach giving to a certain cause, or seeing success in the field on a certain cause. So I know that doesn't make it easier for all of you trying to interpret that. But I think just knowing that, listening to those nuances are really important, from, and thinking about the different generations. It's really, really important to say, like, what does success look like if, your passions and your values you're able to give in that capacity? What does it look like for each person around the table? And I think it's easy to categorize us. And I look at it from on the business side. We use a sales CRM. You guys have some type of CRM, right? That we're all in this database, and you have to be careful to, to really, really pay close attention to, how we're categorizing people and what notes we're taking on the individuals in a family unit or in a giving unit. I think that's really important. And, listening skills and coaching skills and all those things that we all, get trained on in, our organizational culture is really, really important when thinking about, how do you get to the root of, the passions and values that this family or individual will latch on to and be like, yes, I really want to give to that. I think it's really, it should be easier than it is, but it's not, because like, we were talking about before, we're all humans and all of us are so different. And so it's easy to kind of latch on and label a group or a family, or, okay, that person's passionate about this cause. But I think it's really important to kind of play that out along the value chain and say, what are they passionate about that cause? Is it the way something's delivered? Is it the people involved? Is it the location? And et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure, Kathryn, you've got like 20 more things to add to that.
Yeah. Well, if I may jump in here, Nathaniel, I think Christin brought up a really, really important part. And this is where you said it's not rocket science, but maybe it is a little bit of rocket science in the sense that there's the science to it, which is all of the data gathering and the categorizing, as Christin said, that you can put them here, and are they going to be in the bottom of the of the pyramid, or the top or the middle, or whatever it looks like. But then there's the art, and the art is really coming alongside each individual, and it's really walking a journey for them. And if we're doing our job really well, it's a lifelong journey for both of us. And it's really because missionally, we can change what we're passionate about and how we're going to respond to those things. But it's really doing that journey that's mutually beneficial, and really helping become a philanthropic advisor to the individual that we're working with. And that advice can come about the organization that I represent, or that whoever the fundraiser is, and beyond. I want Christin to become a critical philanthropist with a great view of what works and what doesn't work, that's aligned with her values. And so, and how, whether it's World Vision or any other entity at all, where I can say to her, hey, you might want to look at this. You might want to ask them if this improves, or you might ask me, why am we not doing a good job on this? And so that she's able to be a well-informed, well-educated philanthropist. And so I think that part is really critical. The other part is really aligning with this individual on this journey, the individuals on the journey, is, how is this enabling Christin to do a transfer of values to her family, to her children and her family? How will she be described? And so a lot of the work that I do with individuals is really talk to them about what is your philanthropic mission statement? I'm passionate about this, so I do this with this organization to change this. And so, it's finding what you're passionate about, walking with Christin to find what she's passionate about, helping her get as well educated as she can, helping her find the organization that she can partner with, get out of the way and let the organization do the job, hold us accountable, but let us do our work. And then at the end of the day, give or bring others to give. So I think that is really the philosophy that I work with, and the methodology. That's the art side, is the listening, and the other is all the data that you're going to gather and how you rank them on a list and things like that. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I mean, to me, absolutely. And there's so much you both just shared that resonates, and it's kind of ripped from headlines from a lot of our day-to-day work. I mean, just to briefly echo before we move on, Christin, I'm so glad you surfaced the really crucial role of shared values within a family unit, especially, and this is a big difference, I think, between dealing with an individual versus a family. Neither's better or worse, but when there are multiple personalities, right? I think you're spot on. We are all people. Where we've seen it work well and very efficiently is when there is a very clear and well-articulated set of shared values, or at least largely shared values. You can get large groups of family across generations to pretty much, work really strategically. In the absence of that, we've seen predictably the opposite, which is it's a slog. And even if there's sort of shared issues and sectors and problems to work on in the world, in the absence of shared values, it's much, much tougher. It's not impossible, but it's a much slower kind of inefficient grind to get 2, 3, 4, 6 plus individuals, especially across generations, sort of align around some giving priorities. So I appreciate that. I think it's spot on. And Kathryn, I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but couldn't agree more about the accompaniment that's so crucial to this. And maybe this will segue into the next part of a conversation. Taking an approach that is not transactional, I think, is incredibly crucial. And this isn't just, I'm going to pitch you with a shiny deck and show you a bunch of data and then get you excited, and then you're going to strike a check and then we're done, right? And I think that's where a lot of organizations make early mistakes, is treating this as just a transactional relationship, when in fact, as you said, when this is done well, it's a decades long, if not longer, sort of relationship, whether or not the individual, 13 years later is giving to the original organization. But I think that's where you build the trust and social capital, and sort of, can have meaningful, open conversations about the potential to give. So with that as a segue, another question I wanted to ask you both, back to Kathryn's sort of art versus science. On the science side of the ledger, are there tactics, tips and tricks, just sort of methods that you found that do work a little bit better in terms of at least initially broaching conversations with families and individuals? And it's not so much maybe the words to use, but just sort of the mentality and the approach where you've seen it yield better results in terms of at least a meaningful conversation, rather than the ones that fall flat and are sort of dismissed out of hand.
Right. That's a great question. And I think both Christin and I alluded to that, but it's really going in with your initial meeting, if it's a first time meeting with somebody, is to really try to be a great listener in asking the questions on what are they interested in, and where have they been before, and is there a goal that they're trying to achieve? Is it an individual goal? Is it they may choose to be part of a family unit, but striking out on their own and finding their own way differently? And what is it that they're trying to solve by this conversation? And so then that's where you find where that common ground is, and what the role is that I can play alongside them to find the right fit for them. And in that journey, and as I say, that journey generally progresses and can change as you're walking along. We may be interested in providing access to clean water today, but 5 years from now, we may want to be looking at economic opportunities or whatever that looks like, but is to really do that journey together. And so I find the first thing is to be a great listener. The second thing that I find, once you are involved or you have somebody that's really engaged in the work, is to always be as transparent as possible if there are hiccups or major road bumps in the actual execution of the work. We need to have, I would need, if I had a problem with Christin on a project that she was funding, I would need her to be a part of the problem solving. And not that she's going to change the execution in the field, but to really be very transparent about things that have not gone well. Our greatest lessons come from our mistakes or our failures perceived, and then how do we turn that around? And I find that honest transparency is really, really important, and that maintains and continues to establish the integrity of the organization. I think that is critical. And then again, is to really, really be intentional about the values transfer, the shared values with family and children. So those are the things that I find that are most helpful in the work that I'm doing.
Right. Christin, thoughts from your side? I mean, I suspect wrestled with these questions, running a family foundation, being this kind of super connector in many ways. How do you come at some of those questions?
Yeah, I think, the unique position, I mean, Kathryn and I have a long-standing relationship because, you know, we've done this together. So Kathryn, whatever Kathryn just said there, that's what she's helped me do over time and learning. And then she's been authentic and open about like what she just said, when things, you know, she's very transparent, and that's really when you go back to relationships 101, friendships 101. It's, you know, being transparent and open and honest and building that trust. And they all seem like very basic, you know, basic points of, you know, reference to start along the way. And they may not sound very fancy, you know, as far as, you know, philanthropy strategy, but at the same time, the organizations that I have consistently given to over many, many years are the ones that I have relationships with people internal. And I also have been able to learn more and more about the internal workings of the organization and have built trust in the leadership in the organization. So, and I will say, you know, there's also, you know, the point about communication. You know, there are times where you know, Kathryn knows I get really busy with work and with my life outside of all of my philanthropy work. So I kind of, you know, have to go, you know, off the grid a little bit, but then I come back on, and just understanding that there's, you know, that communication and that ability to, you know, be empathetic to people's regular lives and what's going on with their families and work and businesses, and just knowing that, you know, it's always been really wonderful to have Kathryn just alongside me. She's there if you know, when I pick my head up and I have more time to focus and put towards philanthropy. So it's really a you know, I'll say an ongoing ebb and flow of whatever's happening in people's lives and their families' lives. And, you know, I'm sure, you know, business owners, you know, I've sold a business and, you know, so there's just been different times where you have to, on the other side of the table, understanding that and communicating consistently, and at the same time, you know, not feeling bad or taking offense or something if you know, the high net worth individuals and families aren't responding the way that they always have in the past, and just understanding that there are, you know, seasons for everything. That's a big piece of advice I would say, that it's important to understand. And, you know, we all know different generations have different, you know, amounts of free time and ability to engage in different things. So I think going back to the communication aspect is really wonderful, and everybody, you know, receives communication in a different way. I mean, I have one organization that I text back and forth with one of the founders, you know, and that's the way we communicate. I get their emails, but I you know, feel more connected because, you know, I get these text messages, but that's not how I communicate with other organizations. And that's fine. You know, it just depends on, you know, what the receiver, you know, needs or wants and responds to. And I think that's another key point for all of you who are serving high net worth individuals, is to really understand what their communication preferences are, and not just opt in, opt out to emails, but is there some other things? Do they want to be in person? Like, you know, I'm really tired of Zoom meetings and I would rather be hanging out with Kathryn in person. So we're going to try to make that happen sometime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much of that resonates. I joke sometimes internally, thinking back, I don't know if Us Weekly magazine still has this section, but the sort of celebrity sightings, and there's a couple of pages where it's like the stars, they're just like us. And I think that, you know, there's a whole lot of truth to that. You can replace stars with high net worth donors. You know, people are people, and yes, maybe they have a greater ability to give, but, you know, just to echo what you're saying, Christin, the willingness to be, and Kathryn as well, the willingness to be active listeners and to start by listening and trying to understand intent and complexity and sometimes confusion, not knowing where to start. I mean, that's just incredibly crucial, rather than, you know, trying to come to these conversations with the sense that you've got to have all the solutions and just be hard pitching, you know, from the first minutes, which rarely ends well. One last quick one before we wrap up, and this I speak to this from some interesting experience at Geneva Global. We work, you know, with a number of families in many of these ways, and there's always a point in the process where we are asked to take those values, take some of that giving intent and sort of strategic framework, and then figure out literally, you know, who to give to. And this is particularly common for families and individuals who are often at this, you know, starting point on their giving journey. Maybe have done some things, but it's been kind of ad hoc, and now they're trying to be much more intentional. And they've identified issues and sectors where they want to be really active. You know, and one of our challenges, I know, is you can pick your topic of interest, and any of them, or there are literally thousands of organizations, usually globally, who are fantastic, truly. And it's very difficult to just pluck the three or the one that should be the priority for any donor, frankly. And so, you know, we have a lot of ways of trying to square that circle, but I'm curious from both of your perspectives, what kind of advice, or at least perspective, you have on how to, when families get to that moment, move from sort of conceptual principles and giving intent to sort of grantee identification, basically. And are there criteria or sort of markers you would advise families to look for in terms of where that fit could be really good for them? And I realize that's probably an unfairly broad question. There's lots of different answers depending on circumstances, but just curious if there are some usual tips and tricks, or at least things you've seen work well when it comes to grantee selection.
I'll start on this, Christin, and I'm sure you'll have more from the other side. But one of the things that I would say is, when you're looking to give to an organization, as I stated earlier, a personal type mission statement for the individuals or the family is, what is the passion that you're going to get behind? What have you learned about that? And then finding the organization that will meet those. And that's where I think your question is going to, if I understood it correctly, how to find that organization. And I would say, what organization could you be involved with that really is going to make the impact that you're looking for? What is the ROI? And I'm not saying an ROI, a financial ROI. I'm talking about a human ROI. If you want a return on investment, how many lives are going to be impacted or changed in the work that you're doing or that you're supporting? Secondly, is that organization able to really incorporate you as having a voice in it and being able to involve you? And so, as I say, World Vision is a huge organization, but my role is to make it as small and as personal for Christin and her family as possible, so that they can see themselves as part of that solution. And that is the relational journey there. I mean, the first one is a strategic response. The second one is a relational response in how they can see themselves as a part of that. And then lastly, I look at the organizations to be, are they a learning organization? Are they constantly improving what they're doing, how they're doing it, and where the changes are? Not through just strictly self-evaluation, but external evaluation. And so really looking at what the rigor is of the work that they're doing. So that's what I'd say. How about you, Christin?
Yeah, I echo all of that. I think what you said at the very end there, you know, it's different for different people, but the rigor piece, the evaluation piece, I think we've learned over the last, you know, I would say maybe 2 decades, that it's important to evaluate the impact and the outcomes that an organization is, you know, claiming that they have. And if there's some way that you can validate that, maybe it's a word of mouth, or it's someone you could talk to who has been a been a donor before and on a regular, has a history as a donor for that organization. For me, I come at it from the place of, being a business person. It's very important to me that there is, a level of efficiency and effectiveness from an operational standpoint. And that's just my frame. That doesn't mean that's, that's for everybody to, to look at their philanthropy that way. But for me, it's really important to me to know that when I'm giving, it's going to be, used efficiently and effectively, and that there's accountability measures in place that, if I needed to go and kind of dig in and say, hey, I gave this amount and what happened, like if I know that in certain organizations, there's that rigor is there, and that's where I feel comfortable giving. That doesn't mean, I have some friends who don't want to give to large organizations for that reason. They want to really help nurture smaller organizations, and I totally understand that. It's just not the place where, we come at our giving, with our business perspectives on. And it's really important to me as well that there's some longevity and some strong leadership in place that has been there for a while, and that they have some, good governance procedures and, a good board in place that's overseeing the work. And, but like I said, that's not everybody's perspective. And, it's really finding and discovering what's important to the high net worth individuals that you're working with, and how they see and how they want to give. It's kind of a similar profile to an investor, right? Does this person like to invest in early stage ventures and be a little bit more risky or is it someone who really wants to see, economies of scale and a lot of support behind the operations of the organization. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Again, just to sum up a bit, I think one of the takeaways from today's conversation, there are many, but one certainly for me is just this commonsensical but very powerful and important point that, a high net worth donor, in quotes, is a person, and those people can be very, very different, with different interests, different drivers, different risk profiles, different appetite for giving. And I think that's a really great starting point for a lot of organizations who are trying to cultivate fundraising from these kinds of individuals and families. And then for families as well, to not feel boxed into just, a cookie cutter approach, which sometimes, happens. Well, you're this, so you've got to give in this direction, when in fact, there's no reason to sort of play by those constraints. We could go on truly for hours. I'm sure I would get yelled at if I allowed that to happen. So I'll bring us to a close. Just a genuine and heartfelt thanks to both Kathryn and Christin for all of the candor, all of the insight. As you probably heard throughout this conversation, both Global Impact and Geneva Global do a lot of this work day to day. I know the teams that I work with spend a whole lot of the work week working with NGOs and nonprofits who are trying to raise money from individuals and families. And particularly at Geneva Global, we work with a lot of those kinds of families and individuals trying to answer a whole lot of these questions. How do I give? Where do I give? How do I make it happen? So for those that do have any interest in continuing the conversation, please feel free to reach out. The simplest way is via the Global Impact website, which is very easy to remember, charity.org. And we can continue the conversation there. But again, Christin and Kathryn, thanks so much. We're really in your debt and appreciate all of the wisdom today.
Well, thank you for inviting us. It's been a privilege. Thank you.